I don't know how long it was before I woke up, but I knew I wasn't rested. In fact, I felt pretty awful. I was hanging in the air. It took me a minute to realize I had a chain around my chest and under my arms, and I was hanging in the air as my feet waved a bit below me. All foods? I wondered as I looked around. No, I noticed as I looked around. It didn't look like a food place. Or the All Foods factory. This was more. Warehouse. Oh, finally awake, huh? Good. An unfamiliar voice called out and I looked around. Suddenly I was jerked to the side and my eyes met the glowing red spider optics of a fully gorged out Maelstrom. We already called the Oni out. Let him know we have his little sister. Hopefully he comes soon. I really want to rip him into pieces. Think I'll even chip in his arms. They belong to a chum I knew. Good chrome. It'll be nice to wear it. He spoke smiling with an awful smile. I could smell chemicals and death on his breath. That's right, Maelstrom like their drugs and chrome. The fuck's Anon high? I asked. My face was puffed up and it felt like my lips were numb. Yeah, I had gotten hit pretty hard there. The Oni. Oni. The fuck are you trying to pull? He suddenly screamed at me as he shook me around. Hey Ratchet, chill out big guy. Chill here, have a hit from this, it's good shit. A new voice called out as a still gorged out Strum walked in, but at least he wasn't an imminent cyber psycho like this other guy. I hoped. He tossed the Borg an inhaler who dropped me, letting me swing a bit from the chain as he took a hit. Hey. Bad luck girl. Oni has been chopping our chumbas up for the last month, so we are solving that today. If your brother doesn't show up in an hour we are throwing you to the scavenging pit. You got some preem peepers. I know lots of chums that will happily carve them out of your skull. Chatming. I muttered, earring a chuckle from the man who walked up and steadied me. Sorry about the hands. But they were meat anyways. Who knows, if you kill someone in the pit we will let you take theirs. How about it? Sounds like a nice deal, right? He chuckled at me as I glared back at him. Don't be like that, I mean, it's a chance for you to survive, better than nothing, eh? He asked, then chuckled darkly. Yeah, real funny. How was I supposed to kill someone without hands? Weapons? I asked finally as he was just waiting around watching me with a sinister smile on his lips. If he thought I would cry or beg, or something, he was in for a surprise. Hey. Feisty. No weapons, at least no guns. It's about chrome on chrome. But tell you what girl, he said as he walked away towards a table. Ask my stuff. He grinned as he pulled out my knife. Still coated in white Borg blood, he waved it around before pointing it at me. I'll let you take this into the ring, what do you say? Yes. Or no? I didn't hesitate. He was definitely trying to play me, but without that knife I was dead. Yes. He smiled and then he stabbed me. I grunted as he plowed the knife into my right forearm. I couldn't see it as my arms were stuck back behind me, but I felt it. I hung there for a moment, letting cool completely coat my mind. Not a sound escaped me. "I'm gonna kill ya for dat," I rasped after a minute, and the man burst into a happy smile. "I love when they say yes," he whispered into my ear before walking out of the room, leaving me hanging there. Ow. Dash. A long period of time passed where I was forced to just hang there under the watchful eyes of the cyber psycho who would take a hit from his inhaler every couple of minutes. I had time to think. To consider. I had tried to call, but I wasn't able to get anything to go through. Texts bounced back as well. Probably some kind of jammer up. I opened my stat menu. I had a skill and stat point. Time to use it. Because I won't get another chance if I die. I had wanted to level ninjutsu again. But they weren't leaving me unsupervised. The psycho was staring at me. It was creepy. So I only had one real option, something to give me the highest chance in the fight to come. Reflex 6. Blade 6. I let the knowledge flow through me. I don't know if it would be enough, but I could only hope it was. The door opened again. A long painful time later. Well, it's past our deadline. Time to face the scavenging pit. Shame the Oni didn't come. But we'll get him next time. The bastard said as he jerked his head, and the psycho stood up and easily lifted me off the hook that I had been hanging from. I winced as he wasn't gentle, and he definitely hit the knife, jostling it on purpose. Ow. So June's nickname was the Oni? That's pretty cool. Good job, June, you became famous. Fuck, my everything hurt. I think the fuckers broke my nose too. They dragged me out of the back room they kept me in, which had probably been the warehouse's office, into a riot of activity. A party was going on. Or something like it. I was carried through the crowd, and more than a few Maelstrom laughed or even reached out to give me a punch as they carried me through the crowd. Ow! But it wasn't all Maelstrom. Plenty of normals were hanging around, getting drunk or taking drugs. The room wasn't packed exactly, but it was definitely a party. Then I was dropped into a pit. Cat-like saving me once again as I landed well enough not to splatter my skull across the concrete. I was in a charnel house. Old dried blood was everywhere, and I could see body parts still littering the ground. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. If you are going to have a fighting pit, at least have some fucking class. Haha. Welcome everyone. We have a surprise for tonight. The sister of the Oni. He called out and the crowd went wild as I slowly rose up to my knees. They had pulled off the chain from around my chest when they threw me in. So I was finally able to bring my arms forward. To look at my stumps. At least they had actually put something over the ends. The white bandages were stained red as I looked them over. Oh man, I was so glad. I felt cold as ice right now. I know I would be wanting to puke if not for that. The fact my arms didn't shake was probably solely thanks to cool veins. It would be enough. It would have to be enough. Tonight the scavenging pit is open to all. This little demoness has a set of karoshi. So who wants to dig in? He laughed menacingly as the crowd erupted in eagerness. I rested, getting blood back into my shoulders as I waited for what was going to come. Finally, though, the Borg that was running this, the bastard, called for quiet. The crowd went silent, and I looked around, realizing that all of the Maelstrom I could see were armed. Right. This was a trap for June. A chance for good Chrome. A chance to get revenge on our brothers and sisters. Who will face the little demoness? You? He asked, throwing a finger, and the kid he pointed to flexed his artificial muscles. You? He shifted, pointing to another kid who cheered at the offer, showing a toothy smile as he turned to me and flipped me off. I did the same back, but I didn't have hands. The realization shocked me. That instinct. Phantom limb. I shivered. I could feel my hand flipping him off back. I could feel it. I swallowed back bile. No. Keep it cool. I breathed in and out. The pain was there but distant. I would not break. 100 cool XP gained. I almost chuckled at the alert. Yeah. I got this. Yes. Our hunter of the chrome has been chosen. The man roared, and the kid that flipped me off leapt into the pit. I looked him over and winced. The kid looked like a chop shop went to town on his body. His arms were two big, heavily muscled gorilla arms. The sort that were probably designed for someone a lot larger. But the rest of him was chromed as well. The kid was probably more metal than meat. I scoffed at myself. I said kid, but he was probably late teens, early 20s. Easily twice my size before he gorged out on Maelstrom Chrome. The rules of the pit for our newest competitor. There aren't any. Kill or be killed. Begin. The bastard called out, and instantly the crowd started cheering and taunting me. Good thing I really didn't care. I wasn't going to die here. The kid though didn't care. He was showboating for the crowd. I guess that was fair. To him and the crowd this wasn't a cage match. It was an execution. It gave me time to prepare. I couldn't do shit without my weapon. So I turned towards my right arm, where a knife was sticking out of my bicep. As the kid showboated, I took a deep breath and let it out. Then I bent down and gripped the knife in my teeth. Biting down as hard as I could, enough to practically feel my teeth crack, I yanked. The knife came free. I was armed. I was no longer weaponless. Haha. Oh man, look at you. What are you going to do? Gnaw at me to death? The kid laughed, practically crying at the sight of my only method of attack. I charged, ignoring everything else. If I waited, I was dead. He jerked at my sudden approach, but he calmed instantly, a cocky smile on his face. I juked, making it look like I was coming in to try and stab his face, but instead dropping, sliding under the punch he threw at me. My blade cut across the inside of his thigh at the same time that he kicked out, hammering me away. The crowd roared at the sight of blood as I came to a stop on the floor, coughing out the knife in my mouth as I groaned. He had kicked me in the stomach. I felt like my stomach was now inside my lungs. But I couldn't stay defenseless. I reached down with my stupid stumps and stumbled the knife between them, getting it back in my teeth just in time to roll away as he stomped down where my head had been. "Bitch. I'm gonna squeeze your head until those eyes pop right out," he screamed as he charged right after, chasing me down as I rolled and scrambled to get to my feet. Ow! Finally he caught up and I turned around. Going in again. This time he wasn't going for a punch. No, the kid was serious about squeezing the life out of me. He was desperately trying to grab me as I just managed to stay outside of the range of his grasping fingers. He was getting closer. I realized in that moment all of my instincts, all of the experience I had gained in actual combat, and from leveling told me this was the only moment I had. If I didn't do anything now, I was dead. So instead of running like he expected, I charged in, his hands grasping just behind my head as I jerked my whole body, ending with my head to stab the knife right into the side of his neck. It went in. I almost thought I had done it. It went in. But then a pair of hands wrapped around my skull. The pressure was so intense my jaw clicked open despite myself and I was pulled away from his neck. "Be bitch," he rasped once again as I had definitely pierced through something fleshy in his throat, just not deep enough. Then he began squeezing. I stopped hearing the crowd because all I could hear was my own skull creaking. So I did the only thing I could. I lifted my legs up to my chest and kicked with everything I had. Right onto the hilt of my knife still hanging in his throat. It went deeper and then tore, ripping itself free of his synth flesh. The white blood flowed. A torrent that immediately eased up the pressure on my skull as I was dropped to the ground. Gasping as my head spun. I breathed for a moment, just regaining my awareness as I slowly stopped, feeling like my brain was leaking out my ears. I looked over as the kid flopped to the ground. Yeah. Blade 6 had actually taught me something interesting. The best way to slit a throat wasn't a cut. It was a stab, and then a punch. Don't cut the throat. Rip it out. 1000 XP gained. I rose. The crowd was cheering and booing in equal measure, but I wasn't done. I knew that. Whatever this bastard had planned, I was just a toy to him. So I took a few steps over to the kid and with a bit of difficulty I managed to get the knife in between my stumps. Then I brought it up to my teeth. I wouldn't die here. Not tonight. Not like this. I would just rip and tear until it was done. "Bravo," he called out then, the glare on his face instantly shifting to something more showy and fake. "Give a round of applause to our newest winner of the scavenging pit. You all know the rules, don't you?" he called, and the crowd roared back in response. "You keep what you kill." He let the crowd roar for a moment before regaining control. "That's right. We're Borgs of our word. Bring her up here. It's time for her to get chipped," he called out, and I noticed that same cyberpsy hoe that had dragged me out here jumped into the pit. Fuck. I tried to struggle, but the guy was too fast, and too strong. The moment his hands touched me, it was over and I was pinned and struggled desperately as he hauled me out of the pit. The kid's body dragged along as well. I was pushed into a ripper dock chair, and strapped down legs, hips and neck, and locked down my arms, though. They didn't seem to care much about that. "What do you think, Cyberweb? Think you can do something for this poor girl made of meat?" the bastard said to the open air. If I didn't have cool on at full blast, I absolutely would have been freaking out as lights lit up in the dark ceiling and a cyber spider crawled down the wall over my head. "Oh, I think we can do something for this pathetic meat. Bring the chrome." And the way the spider trailed off as it looked over the crowd. The whole crowd screamed along with him a moment later. "Let's get chipping. When I get out of this, I'm going to murder all of you," I tell him as the spider chuckles. One of its legs lifted up, showing a circular saw. That instantly began revving up. "If you survive, maybe," it chuckled at me as it began cutting. The fact I didn't scream seemed to make the crowd lose a lot of interest. But every sadistic cut and eager grin hardened my resolve. "Okay, Maelstrom. Now it's personal." It took a few hours even with their spider ripper. Then they threw me back into the pit. I was not handling what they had done to me well. The arms were oversized, bulging things that looked overlarge on the kid that I had killed, but probably looked grotesque on me. But I wasn't thinking about the look of bulging synth muscle and chrome. I was struggling against the feeling they were giving me. Pain, burning cold, and heat. Like every nerve in the arms were suffering. The fucker hadn't connected them right. considering they had laughed at my responses while chipping them in. I knew that was on purpose. They had given me the arms all right, but tried to make them as useless and crippling as possible. The crowd burst back into a roar as their game was going to continue. Fuck. How many times were they going to rip me apart before this little game of theirs was over? How much of me would even be left? I had already lost both of my arms. The spider fucker had cut off both of my arms. Gone. He had sawed off what was left. I was going to kill him. I shivered as the pressure of the connection between me and my new limbs was just too much. I could barely think, barely breathe. Even if the pain wasn't crippling me like they had hoped, the connection was wrong. Like someone had connected the arms backwards into the wrong part of my body, and then made every sensation feel backwards or wrong. Right now they were just twitching hunks of chrome and synth meat connected to me, an anchor on each side of me. And they were dragging me down just as an anchor would. Well, she survived. The little demoness survived her first gift from the scavenging pit. Let's see if she can do it again. Who is up next? The bastard called out and the crowd went wild. But I couldn't focus on that. I kept feeling the color pink out of my left wrist, and the sound of an A-flat from my right shoulder. The roar of the crowd barely even reached me. So this is what it felt like when someone had bad chrome. Like up was down, and down was up. Like everything would be better if they just died. My nose was bleeding. My head was spinning. One of my eyes was twitching. A jerking spasm to the right that meant I struggled to see straight. I puked a bit. A splash of watery bile escaped me, but that was all I had in my stomach. I would survive this. I would. This is not how I was going to die. Not in a pit. Not before I could even do anything. Gunfire. Explosions. Screams. I blinked or tried to. I blinked as I looked up. The crowd wasn't roaring as they watched me. They were screaming or yelling expletives. I wasn't able to really focus. I could just tell that gunfire and explosions were going on. Screams and roars of rage. All the while I lay there barely able to get my head off the concrete. I don't really know how long it took before everything grew quiet. The world spun. Everything shifted. I was still struggling to process. Too much was coming from the arms. I could make out what my eyes were telling me, because my left pinky was trying to tell my brain it was where it should take its vision from. It wasn't exactly working. But then even as my left eye twitched I saw him. June holding me, crying out. The words were muffled and gibberish. It was getting worse. My brain was in trouble. June as always was an idiot. Of course he needed his cute and brilliant little sister to remind him to get to work. So I did the only thing my body could still do. I jerked forward and headbutted him as hard as I could. Which probably wasn't that hard. Goof-o-m. I tried, and even to my own ears I realized my voice was coming out wrong. The words weren't right. Come on, cool. Every inch of that coldness, I needed it, even if I passed out after, even if it was too much to stay alive after. I needed to say this. I needed June to get to work and not freak out. Get THM off. I screamed as loud and strong as I could. I blanked out after. Sight, sound, feeling, everything was a kaleidoscope of gibberish. June POV. June took a deep breath as he held Motoko. The assault above him was going well, but his heart could only focus on his sister. Holding her limp, twitching form in his arms. He felt his breath coming out hot, as he once again held his sister after a kidnapping. Come on, Oni. No time to stand around, get your sis out of here, we got Strom to kill. A cackling voice reminded him he wasn't safe. That Motoko wasn't safe. That thought burned him. This was his fault. It was always his fault. He should have been there. Should have protected her. Should have protected her. For a moment the Motoko in his arms was replaced by Kasumi. Her last breath breathing out against his lips as her heart stopped, no matter how hard June tried to put pressure against her bleeding wounds. Then a gonk smashing into the concrete beside him brought him back. He was holding Motoko. Not Kasumi. She was still in danger. Because of him. He rose and leapt, the pit hardly deep enough to slow him even carrying his sister. He did his best to hold on to the bulging arms that were now connected to her, that were probably killing her with every moment they were latched on. He ran through the fight, as many of the maelstrom died from swift blades around him. His team, ensuring he would get through. It had taken weeks to prove himself enough to join the kamikaze. They weren't the true elites in the Tiger Claws. No, they were the closest to cyber psychos. The craziest. The ones that killed the most. So June had joined, willingly chipping himself with anything he could find to prove he was one of them. It had been tough to get them to come. He had argued for some time, begging them for help in rescuing his sister. In the end, their own desire to kill Strom was what brought them. They were here, along with plenty of Tiger Claw regulars. If only the preparation for this assault hadn't taken so long. He jumped into cover as a gonk sprayed at him, the bullets bouncing around him as the Strom wasn't the most accurate. The fighting was intense. A moment later he died as a grenade bounced past his foot. Many of the Tiger Claws had been outfitted with grenades. The initial assault had seen more than half of the Maelstrom die from explosions. Packed people at a party didn't do well with so many explosions. The kamikaze had ensured the regulars could get that close, killing the guards outside, and shutting down the exterior security. He rushed past the fighting, thankful that the surprise assault had been so successful. June was just thankful Motoko was still alive. He had been so terrified he would be late. The first emotion other than rage he had felt in a while. He hadn't wanted to let the Maelstrom deadline go past. He knew what they would do to his sister. What they were definitely already doing. Aghari had been forced to restrain June from rushing ahead as the deadline had drawn closer. But Aghari, like the rest of the kamikaze, didn't care for his emotions. Only killing Maelstrom. So she had held him back from disrupting their attack. Her usual cackling and jokes gone in exchange for a simple, almost alien coolness as she restrained him. He clung to Motoko harder. He was so glad that he wasn't too late. That she was alive. This time he would get her to a good doctor. A good dripper. There would be no second coma. He prayed. Awareness came in a drowsy haze. Eventually I was blinking, realizing something was wrong. Unfamiliar ceiling. Motoko. June's voice called out and suddenly he was there. Hi June, I offered as I raised my hand to wave at him, but it just sort of flopped. I looked at it. It looked at me. No wait, that wasn't right. It just sort of flopped. He silly wrist, you aren't supposed to floppy flop. Oh, it was actually pretty cool looking, all armored cyborg style. Although it looked. I narrowed my eyes at the floppy wrist. Militech Condor. I read aloud as my wrist sort of floppy whoppied at me. Motoko? She is still on a lot of painkillers, June. She probably doesn't even realize what is going on. A woman's voice called out and I turned my head, my hand following to look too. Hello. I offered and my wrist sort of flopped a greeting. Very rude, Mr. Hand. You should greet someone properly, I scolded it as it continued to just sort of twist around. Oh wow, Mr. Hand's ball joint let him go all the way around. Gross. I giggled a bit at it before I realized June was talking to the lady. Lady. She'll be okay? The surgery. Well, it went as well as could be expected. There shouldn't be any permanent neurological damage, despite the Strom's best attempts. Your sister has a strong will. Well, what I saw when I dug those arms off her. They were trying to break her, June. We are lucky. I'll kill them. I'll hunt those bastards down. They did this because of me. June growled and I could see his fists clenching and unclenching. June was upset. Hold on. I was a little loopy. A wave of cold washed over me. Even if it felt tired, I was pretty sure I was running very close to the edge of what Kool-Aid could handle. I mean, how long had I had the cold freezing my veins, keeping me cool and collected even when they cut off my fucking arms? Motherfuckers. I cursed as I jerked off the bed, only to sort of slide sideways as I was still strapped down. Motoko? Those assholes. I'll fucking kill them. I cursed as everything came rushing back to me clear and focused, with the drugs suddenly not making everything loopy. Motoko, June yelled as he grabbed me and stopped me from sort of mashing my new cyber arms against the straps trying to get them off. Hey June, gimme a second. I need to go murder some bastards. I screamed as I still ineffectually tried to get the straps off. Drugs are still pumping. Your sister is surprisingly resistant. The Ripper? I think she was a Ripper anyways, said as she checked a monitor beside me. Calm down, Motoko. No, you calm down. I surprised him with my intellectual rebuttal. Finally I gave up, raising my floppy mechanical wrists up to my face. Why are these not working? I demanded. Please lay back down. The Ripper spoke as she walked up beside, although I noticed she kept her distance. Out of punching range. Clever girl. The surgery was successful, but your body took a lot of stress. It will take some time for everything to smooth out. A human body isn't meant to undergo 2 emergency cyberization surgeries only hours apart. Please lay back down so you don't hurt yourself. Motoko lay down. Please Fo. Yeah, sounds good. I can always commit genocide later. I agree with the doctor as I let my body relax and stop fighting June. Genocide. It's what you call it when you plan to exterminate an entire group. I informed her promptly. I would say extermination, but I will acknowledge Maelstrom are still people. They are just people that are all going to die. Just lay back, Emoto, June whispered soothingly as he held me in his stupid cyber arms. They weren't very comfortable to be held in. June, you need real skin, you give terrible hugs right now. Just awful. I told him as I rested back. Huh, that was kinda weird. Where did all my anger go? Ooh. Cool was tired. I couldn't hold it. Sure Motoko. Sure, he whispered soothingly, slowly stroking my hair, which that was nice, but it could be better. Real skin. Need that +5 to hugs, June, I tell him with a yawn as I feel myself sort of losing track of everything again. Okay Emoto, okay, he continued whispering, and I was really tired. I blanked out again. I woke up, who knows how long later. I was still drugged up but not as badly. I could feel it making everything seem sort of muffled or fluffy, but I wasn't having conversations with my wrist anymore. Probably for the best. I could feel my cheeks heating up a bit as I remembered that fact. Then it died when I remembered what had happened. The medical bay I was in was pretty small, a backroom Ripper office like I expected. The many pieces of tiger claw stuff strewn around told me a lot. I guess June had taken me to his Ripper. I was still strapped down, I noticed as I looked around the little room. I slowly raised my arm, which wasn't easy. Yep. Still there. Still chrome. I felt a shiver down my spine. It wasn't right. The feeling it gave as I slowly managed to form a fist and then spread my fingers. So that was it. I had been planning on some chrome arms. It had been my plan. Probably a set of mantis blades, or a cool monowire, or gorilla arms for the utility. There had been so many options I hadn't decided. I guess the decision had come and gone. Oh, finally up are we? The woman from before the Ripper asked as she entered. She was an older woman. Not quite graying, but probably close to that. Her face lined in a few wrinkles, but the shining chrome lines up and down her cheeks showed just how much chrome she had. Yeah, June? I asked, looking around and not seeing him. I managed to convince him to sit in a chair outside about an hour ago. He passed out nearly instantly. Your brother doesn't sleep much even when his little sister isn't in my clinic. I nodded at that. June being too stubborn to actually sleep when he needs to didn't surprise me at all. And me? How? How bad is it? I asked as I raised my arm. I shivered as it didn't feel right. It felt like I had 4 arms. Or more. The feeling of phantom limb meant even as I tried to move my arm it moved slower than my expectations, leaving me with a feeling of my limb being in the wrong spot. Better than you would expect, she answered simply as she sat down in a chair beside me. Considering what they did to you, I expected you to be brain dead. But you managed to keep from having an aneurysm. I pulled the connections as fast as I could, which is why your arms fell off. I wasn't exactly gentle. Speed was more important. But that will heal. Give it a few days and your kinesthesia should feel normal. Yeah. It's a little off. Nerve damage or sorts. Those things they put on you were overloading your nervous system. It will be tender. She shrugged at that. You are alive and not brain dead. It's more than most could hope for. Yeah. I muttered as I looked up at the unfamiliar ceiling. That had been some shit. It was probably the drugs I was on leaving me feeling sort of fluffy, but I could feel it. The anxiety and nervousness bubbling up under it. I would probably be a little frantic for a while. I really hadn't been expecting a kidnapping attempt in the middle of the day right in front of my home. Fucking Night City. A phrase I hear often. The Ripper chuckled, as she reached out and without a word started poking her tools into my shoulder. I would have flinched if I wasn't feeling so mellow from the drugs. What are you doing? Checking on the connections. The condor is a solid piece of chrome, but your circumstances make it complicated. Militech condor. That's what it's called, right? I asked as I scanned the other arm she wasn't working on. I had no idea what a Militech condor was, or what it could do. Unfortunately, my scan didn't tell me the things I really wanted to know. Was it a good arm? Was it garbage? Would I have to worry about it failing on me? Or breaking? Never heard of them before? Not much of a chrome head, are you? No. I know some things, but not a lot about specific cyberware. Alright, I'll give you the rundown. The Condor is a few gens old. It was popular before the Unification War, but Militech came out with the Orion at the beginning of the war as a surprise for Arasaka. The Condor wasn't able to compete, so they got sold off as work pieces. Lot of factories in Watson bought up the stock after the war and started shipping them in. The woman spoke in a quiet voice, which I realized she was probably doing to distract me. But I kinda wanted to know this anyway. They do just fine there, but as you would expect, a lot of factories sell off stock, or lose people over the years. They may be a decade old, but there isn't anything wrong with them. They just don't quite compete with the later advancements. Don't worry. You won't have any issues with them. They are better than your old fleshware. The woman offered and I blinked. Fleshware? Yeah. You've got cyberware. And fleshware, she said, chuckling as she pointed first at my arm. Then she poked me in the stomach. Sorry. It's a Ripper joke. She added afterwards as I just kinda looked at her blankly. Right. Well, you won't have any issues. They are rated for combat, so they won't break the first time you have to punch some strong lowlife. Good to know, I whispered quietly as I looked them over. They looked utilitarian. The metal was a sort of polished steel finish. They sort of reminded me of Johnny's arm, at least in color. They were definitely more realistic than his arm though. A smooth contour between the digits on the fingers meant the whole thing looked more like a normal arm, just dipped in metal and plastic. I looked away. What else could I do? I wasn't ready for this. At least not like this. I had wanted my first foray into cyberware, into transhumanism, to be a momentous moment for me. Something that meant I took a huge plunge into the future. Into a dream I had since I was a kid. Cyborgs were cool. I didn't ask for this, I whispered quietly. Yeah. I feel you, Adam. I get it. Nothing important. I responded quietly as I lowered my arm. I would just have to roll with the punches. Alright. This one looks good. The connections are healing well. Just make sure you take it very slow for at least a week. She orders with a firm look as she spins around the Ripper chair I was in, and she starts working on my other shoulder. Seeing her open up my shoulder, the metal plates shifting, letting her access the insides, was weird. I did my best to just ignore the feeling. It was just another thing I would have to get used to, I guess. The door suddenly opened, and I looked over expecting June. Only that wasn't June. The man, and I used the term lightly, that stepped inside, was more chrome than flesh. Legs, arms, chest, even his face was chromed out. So the kid lived, he said. His voice sounded robotic and lifeless. She did. Tougher than she looks. The Ripper said as she rose up away from my shoulder instantly as he came in. How can I assist you today, Fujimura-sama? She asked with a bow after she stood before him. Leg is acting up again, he stated simply, and the Ripper nodded, gesturing for another chair in her little clinic that he swiftly settled into. As she instantly began opening up his right leg and checking things out. She could have at least closed up my shoulder first. The room was quiet for a while as I watched the Ripper work on the Borg's leg. Suddenly the Borg turned his head towards me. Your brother used up a lot of favors to get you in here. Hope you appreciate that. He suddenly spoke to me, his blazing eyes a swirl of color. Yeah. I'll owe June a lot. You owe the Tigers a lot. We take care of our own, but as much as we give, we expect just as much back, he said, his eyes locked to mine. A promise, and a threat in one. Hours later, after the Ripper had checked over the Borg, who hadn't said a word to me following his declaration, and after she had checked me over, June suddenly burst into the room. Motoko. Present. I responded as I looked away from the TV that the Ripper had kindly turned on for me. I would have just left, but she told me to stay resting. She didn't want me walking around putting any pressure on the recovering nerves. Motoko. June babbled a bit. The last time I had seen him he had been so cold, but now it was like all the frost had melted away, just leaving the terrified teenager beneath. Poor June, I would just have to be a good little sister and help him recover. Thank you, June, for saving me, I told him with a smile and a twitch of my arm as I instinctively tried to give him a thumbs up. Motoko, I didn't save you. I got you put there in the first place. I knew I shouldn't have come to the apartment. Everyone warned me to stay away. That if I went back they could track me to you. I should have listened. He cursed, his fist clenching, and looked like he was going to punch something. Now that's dumb, I told him firmly, cutting right through everything. Avoiding someone to try and protect them doesn't really protect them. Like ever. You should have just told me. We could have figured something out. But I'm not going to berate you, June. What happened wasn't your fault. You didn't kidnap me, or mean for it to happen. I shook my head, wiping away that irritation at June avoiding me like the plague to protect me. I knew that wasn't the full truth. June had been cold the last time I saw him. I was still really worried about how he was handling all of his new chrome. I was feeling it too. The different senses. The way everything wasn't quite right. That niggling on your brain as something foreign pressed against it. I could see how people lost their minds. They wouldn't have known you even existed if I hadn't. If I hadn't bothered you so much and threatened to run out in the gang war to find you? It's funny, if they had jumped me about a minute earlier things would have been different. I had just packed all my guns in the car. I told him with a chuckle as I imagined those Borg's faces if they had been facing me with the carnage and a bit more equipment. When did you get a car? No, I mean how? June asked, looking confused, but before I could answer he waved his own question off. Never mind. That isn't important right now. Emoto. Just rest. I promise. I'll find the ones who did this to you. I'll kill them. You'll never have to worry about them again. I promise, he said, his voice turned to gravel as he growled out his promise. Denied. I immediately cut in. June was hot-headed. If I didn't immediately squish his vengeful rampage he would really go do it. What? He asked, kinda surprised, and I really wish I had control of my arms because I would be crossing them in an X right then. I've already got a blood vendetta against them. So until I cut off like all of their limbs no one else can kill them. Denied. I answered simply with a nod. Yep. I was hunting those Borg fucks once I recovered. Especially that spider motherfucker. Cut off my arms? I'll cut off all 8 of your legs and your arms. June sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose in obvious irritation. This isn't a game, Motoko. These men are dangerous. You should know that. You aren't going to be able to just kill them. Sure I will. I told him, but it was then I realized. June had no idea how much of an ass kicker I was. I had done all these gigs, but June kept being June and not being around. I'm pretty cool, you know? I've done all sorts of cool stuff since you've been gone. I went on a gig for Wakako even. June blinked at that before wincing. You bothered Wakako? She hates Okasan, Motoko. Why would you go to her? 'Cause she was right around the corner. Really? She hates our mum? Weird. Do you know why? It's not important. Motoko. Emoto. I don't care how many jobs you have done. We will talk about that later. But you aren't going after the Maelstrom. They are dangerous. I had to bite back on my instant retort of but you do it. That never works on people. Ever. June, you remember how you left to go kill a bunch of Maelstrom because your tune died, and I kept trying to tell you to stop and come home so you don't end up a cyber psycho or die? I asked him, describing all of his actions over the last while. No. That's not what happened. Or how I would describe it. Right. But that feeling you got whenever I told you to stop? Yeah. That's what I'm feeling. I love you, June, and I promise I'll be safe. And then I felt that coldness freeze my soul. My hands were still wonky, more floppy than useful, but I was able to do this. I reached out and wrapped my hand around June's jacket and pulled him just a bit closer so he could see the surety in my eyes. But I will not be satisfied until I beat them both to death with their own limbs, and nothing, not even you, will get in my way of murdering those monsters. I swore to him, letting him see just how serious I was before I let go of his jacket, wincing a bit at the difficulty in getting my hand to actually release. I ended up sort of tugging on his jacket for a moment until I finally seemed to get the right connection across and the hand popped open. Sorry about that. I told him as I settled my arm back on the Ripper chair I had been resting on. No, he said as he pulled me into a hug that felt crushing as I felt him bury his face into my hair, as he held me tight. I won't let you throw yourself into danger, Emoto, he whispered into my hair. This time I decided not to say anything. June didn't understand yet. But he would. A bit of time for my body to recover. Maybe a full night's sleep sometime soon, a bit of practice to make sure my arms well worked. And I would go hunting. That dark sinister part of me that I kept pushing away when I considered my proclivity for murder rose up. This time I didn't push it down. This time I didn't justify it to myself. Sure, they were evil. They had done a great evil to me. But in order to find them I was fully prepared to commit even greater evils against anyone that stood between me and them. I felt no sympathy for all the Maelstrom gangers that I would soon run into. Only eagerness. Eventually June's hovering drove even the Ripper Doc mad, and she proclaimed that I was well enough to not sit around here anymore. So June decided to take me home. But not our home. While June tried to force me into a wheelchair once I was finally released from the chair, I wasn't having it. It was my arms that were floopy, not my legs. With a double set of slings to keep my arms from jostling my wounded shoulders, I followed June out of the room, through a basement with a bunch of servers, and a large couch and TV to rest on, up a flight upstairs into a dojo? This is Duravia Dojo. Don't tell anyone this is where we are, June tells me as he shows me around the building. Why? Because no one outside the higher-ups in the Tiger Claws know this is where we are resting, or where we go to recover, June says, sounding a little proud as he shows me around. He seemed irritated about having to do it, but then every time he seemed to be growing annoyed he would look at me, and suddenly, the old June would be back. I guess having his kid sister cut up was cutting through his, well, I wasn't going to deny it, his budding cyberpsychosis. Who is we? I'm not important, and I didn't think you were either. No offense. My hurried addition came too late, because June was actually looking a little offended as he puffed up a little. We are the Kamikaze. The force that crushes a maelstrom, he answered, sounding all proud. But I just couldn't help but think it was some serious weeb shit, and coming from me that said a lot. So I just nodded and kept my mouth shut. June sounded proud of his weeb club, so I wasn't going to make fun of it. Allowed anyways. So the Tiger Claws put together a group of people with heavy cyberware to fight against the Maelstrom Borgs. Exactly. This is our HQ and medical station. Which is why you can't tell anyone where you are. Promise me, Emoto. Promise. I answered simply. It wasn't really a big deal for me. Good. Come. I will show you where you will be staying, he said as he walked me out the dojo through a side door, into an alley. There were food vendors sizzling things around the edge of the fence, but June walked in between two vendors who simply ignored June's presence as if he didn't exist. Behind the vendors was a small little nook between the large complex next door and the dojo, mostly filled with trash, and nothing else. No door. But June didn't slow walking up to the building. He knocked on a window and after a few moments it opened. With a little help from June I made it through into a small break room for the building. The woman that sat at a desk beside the window was simply tapping away and ignoring our presence as June guided me out of the break room and into a hallway. Then he walked into an apartment. This is where you will be staying until Maelstrom are gone. I'll go out to gather some clothes and things from the apartment later, June informed me as I looked around the small, mostly barren apartment that had a few of June's things laying around. His jacket that he rarely wore was thrown over the coffee table and there was a mess of old food containers littering a small table. So this is where you've been staying? Yes. Come on, I'll get you settled in. You can take the bed, he says simply as he guides me into a small bedroom that was equally barren besides a few pieces of June's clothing scattered around. Home sweet home, I told him as I looked around. I just wanted to go back to the apartment. I had so much stuff to do. But for now I would go along with June's crazy secret apartment hideaway. I didn't get a full night's sleep. It seems dumb since I could literally sleep as long as I wanted instantly, but I chose specifically not to do that. I would need to see a Ripper again probably very soon, and it would be fairly obvious if I walked in with new arms, yet not a single hint of the surgery still existing. So I would deal with a bit of early rising grumpiness. The few hours I had allowed myself did help. washing out more of the pain meds that only made me fuzzy instead of really helping. Although my arms were still floppy, that would take a few days more to recover from. I carefully put my arms back in their slings as I left the room that June had given up for me, only to find June resting on the couch staring at the TV, whispering a news channel with a particularly blank look on his face. He didn't even notice as I stepped out. Just sitting there, quietly, alone. Couldn't sleep either, huh? I asked him, despite the fact I could have slept the whole day away if I really wanted. He didn't startle but seemed to blink a little as if he wasn't sure where he was. It took him a moment of staring before he spoke. Motoko, you should go back to sleep. You need to rest. I think I've slept all I'm gonna get tonight, I offered as I walked over and settled in next to him on the couch. You should sleep yourself. Staring blankly at a TV isn't going to make you feel better. Don't tell me he cut himself off as his voice rose in that cold way that I was becoming more familiar with. You back with me? I asked after a moment, and he really did twitch this time. I never left. I'm fine. You can lie to me, June, but you shouldn't lie to yourself. It's unhealthy. I'm fine. I'm not going cyber psycho. The fact you already know what I'm suspecting is a bad sign, June. I tell him, causing him to sort of glare and sort of cringe at the same time. So instead of saying anything else, I just scooted in, much to June's discomfort. Ignoring whatever was going through his head, I acted like all little sisters and just flopped against him. Little sisters and cats. Very similar in many mysterious ways. It took a while, but eventually June relaxed and the tension I could in him slowly eased. Eventually he spoke. It's just the shakes, and I zone out sometimes. Nothing crazy. June, please don't add in any more chrome. Not even one thing. Please. For me. My begging didn't get a response for a long time as we sat there in the dark, lit only by the newscaster. I'll think about it. Good. What about you? He asked suddenly, a little gruffly, but gentle as he reached out and poked gently at my chrome shoulders. I opened my mouth to deny any issues. To tell him I was fine, and I would be ready to go kill some stromes soon. But I had just told him, he shouldn't lie to himself. I couldn't exactly go and instantly make myself a hypocrite. I'm alive, I told him, which earned me his full interest as something must have come out in my voice. I didn't have time to think about it while I was there. Too much fighting off the pain, or trying to survive. I don't know if I'm really finished processing it. So maybe, but I really hate that it happened to me. That it happened to me again. I thought. When you got kidnapped again. I thought. I didn't think I could get lucky enough to save you twice. I'm glad. That you aren't dead. That you aren't crazy. That I don't have to meet you again for the third time. I'm sorry I'm not the Motoko you originally knew. I admitted quietly, a part of me well aware I wasn't entirely his sister. That I was just playing pretend with the teenager who was going through so much. I had felt sad for June from the first time I walked into our little apartment and realized that he was alone. All he had was me, and all I had was him. Please, he whispered quietly into the dimly lit room. Just take care. I don't want you doing something like me, and losing you. I can't. I leaned into him heavily for a moment, taking in the raw fear that was in his voice. But I didn't respond. Because I knew I would recover soon. That I would be ready to get my own revenge. I wouldn't lie to myself. I wanted revenge, and with the gamer system pushing me forward, I was gonna get it. Right now, I could just use a hug. I told him instead, which meant a few moments later his arm was wrapped over my shoulder. Stupid Juni. Get some real skin already. Your arms are the worst at hugs. I told him, but I didn't let him pull away.